Hi there, guys. My name is Stuart from Marshall Music, and tonight on Stu Chats I have with me, I'm not allowed to say this, he hates this, but I have with me Professor Jonathan Crossley.
Doctor, you get into trouble. Yeah.
Doctor. Same thing.
No, not really. I mean, the professor thing is bestowed on you, so you can't bestow it on yourself.
Wow. Doctor, professor, whatever you call it, of music at Wits University. Yeah. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Stu.
We've been good mates for a long time.
Far too long.
Far too long. Watched your career from more humble beginnings, and you've done very, very well. I'm really proud of you.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I get to talk about that stuff.
Yeah. Tell us about your beginnings in music. I mean, did you come from a musical upbringing?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of, thinking through what to talk about this evening, and realizing that it's so complicated.
Okay.
And so I started. I'm from Northern Ireland, so we came across when I was 6, and I was already hassling my dad then to study guitar. So I started classical lessons when I was 6, and then did that throughout school. Went through the grade syllabus, did my grade 8 and that when I was 15, and then went on to Wits. Actually, I've never really left Wits, I guess, and did a bachelor's in honours in classical music at Wits, and then I met a South African jazz pianist, Paul Hanmer, in '97. And started working with him a bit, and then went on to study. He advised me to go see Johnny Faree, the late great jazz guy.
Yeah.
And I studied with Johnny for about 4 or 5 years, and did a master's on his life and work. And
it was late '90s, early 2000s.
It was early 2000s.
Yeah.
So master's was in 2003. It was like a kind of a, Johnny was classic. He would play a reharmonization of a jazz standard for you, and then you'd stop him and say, Johnny, what did you do over there? And then he'd do something completely different. So he was completely, his ear was like that. So the master's was really like trying to transcribe that into some musical form.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then...
going back now, who was your first classical teacher?
Sure, that's amazing. It's strangely, there was a really, really great teacher in Benoni, of all places.
Okay.
His name was Ron Dolan. He actually is still teaching, but he's in Sydney now. He lives in Sydney. And quite a few guitarists came through his studio.
Yeah.
And there were, back then in the 80s, there was a thing called the Johannesburg Classical Guitar Society, which was Fritz Buss, the famous teacher.
Yep.
And the late David Hewitt, Tessa Ziegler, Ron Dolan. And so there was quite a scene, strangely.
Yeah. I mean, those are all absolute legends. Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So I studied with him when I was in school, and then I went to David for a little bit at Wits, and then I kind of annoyed everyone by going to study classical guitar with some pianists because they were really cool for me.
Yeah, that's insulting, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, it's very insulting at that time, but I was young and arrogant, and potentially right.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So I studied with Malcolm Ney, who's actually head of Wits now. He's an incredible musician. And his teacher, a lady called Pauline Nossel, has been around for years, like an amazing musical mind. So.
I don't know.
She's retired now,
Yeah, okay. And then, let's go forward to Johnny Faree.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit more about that in detail, and what was that experience like? I mean, you're so fortunate to have spent so much time with him. I mean,
Johnny was amazing because Fleur Juan Oosthuizen and Hugo de Waal, and there were the three of us. I think at that point were all with Johnny, because Johnny was teaching at Pretoria Tech, Tshwane University of Technology, and but I was from outside, so I came in at it from a different angle, and what turned out to be, or what started as like an hour-long lesson on a Friday, wound up with me basically pleading to leave. So that it'd be like 3 to 4 hours until eventually I'd say, Johnny, please, can I go home, And
so he was just like spewing forth too much, eh?
Yeah, I guess
overload.
Yeah, as a teacher myself, like if you have a student that's hungry, the time becomes irrelevant, Teaching's wonderful when it's like that. And so I guess for Johnny, I was just sucking everything I could.
Yeah. Which is what he loved,
which is what he loved. And also it was good. I think it was cool for him, for somebody to be writing this stuff down in the process of the masters, capturing it. And also, there were a lot of stories about Johnny, like people not believing what people had said international and who he'd worked with.
Yeah.
And so I set about proving all that, which was exciting. So I got letters from Billy Cobham, the drummer from Vishnu Orchestra, and from Steve Kahn, and John McLaughlin wrote to me personally as well, just to confirm what he was saying.
Right.
Yeah, so that was, it was a wonderful thing.
Oh, wow. Brilliant.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Brilliant. Well, what was a typical day like with Johnny Faria, the environment?
So let me think. So I'll tell you that one of the best stories is the first lesson. It's a pivotal moment for me.
Yeah.
I rocked up at Johnny's house, and at that time I was playing the Bach E major prelude, which is quite heavy, it's one of the classical works. And then another modern work. So Johnny said to me, play me something. So I've prepared this. I sit down, I get out the guitar, thunder through this E major prelude, finish and look at him. And he was smoking a cigarette, and he goes, yeah, that's nice. So play me something else. So I play him this modern work, and flying over the guitar. He says, yeah, that's nice. And he picks up the guitar, and he plays a chord. Clang. He says, play something over that. And I was like, great, okay, I know why I'm here. But I couldn't. I didn't know what to do. So the lessons really took that form. It was Johnny firing off chords at me, and then, having to interpolate kind of modal. So I think modally now. So modal superimpositions over the harmonies.
Yeah.
I think Johnny in different periods thought modally and thought harmonically, but in that period he was really thinking modally.
And was it him who kind of got you into your love of jazz?
Yeah, I really wanted to play standards and stuff at that stage, because I couldn't improvise as a classical musician.
Well, you're not taught that, yeah.
No, you rely on the notation and interpretation. So then I realized one of the other ways I could get somewhere is I started doing some corporate events, and I started booking duets with Johnny. So I was getting a lesson like on the Friday, and then I'd book a couple of events during the week and get to play with him for 3 hours.
Cheeky.
Oh yeah, it was great. pay him a good fee, and just sit and watch,
just watch him,
And then in between we'd have coffee, and he'd say to me, right, that didn't work over there. So I just had these continuous lessons for about 2 or 3 years. Very, very cool.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, that was good. And then from that I started my own projects,
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about these the projects from the early 2000s.
So the first one was actually I think it was released in 2001. That was released on FMR Records, which is a London label. And that was kind of when I was just starting out improvising. It was original compositions, and Johnny played on that record.
Okay.
And Wessel van Rensburg, a South African pianist, who's now based in Holland.
Yeah.
He played on that as well. And Reza Khota, I don't know if you know Reza. Mm-hmm. He's just released a new album called Liminal. Incredible jazz guitarist. He won the Standard Bank Young Artist Competition some years back. So he's at the University of Western Cape. Okay. So the four of us, we were all very young. That did quite well. And then I think in 2004, Classic FM approached me to do an album with the wind octet. So that was bass clarinet, flugelhorn, trumpet, sax, flute, etc.
Yeah.
Bass, Mark Doobie on bass, Peter Orette on drums, and myself on guitar, and then Carlo Mombelli did some of the arrangements.
Okay. And Kevin Davidson.
Kevin Davidson was on that,
on sax,
Sidney Amnisi, Alan Thompson. Yeah, that was a good record.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, that was
I really
good.
enjoyed that, yeah.
And it was like kind of transitioning,
Yeah.
So the first record was very kind of ECM-y, classical. Second record was more transitional, and then 2007, I went electric. Then we did the album called Funk for the Shaolin Monk, which
We're with those guys from the Cape. What were their names again?
So the band, they were called Offshore. They were a tiny little trio I discovered on a trip to the Oatsfin Festival. I went down to Nice. The drummer's become massive. His name's Jonno Sweetman.
Yes, that's right, Jonno Sweetman.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he's really big now. The bass player doesn't play anymore, which is a real pity.
Yeah.
And then Martin Wolfart, the pianist, he's still in Nice. Anyway, that was a good record, and then that record started touring Europe. With that record, I got the kind of inroad to go into the Eastern Bloc countries for a number of years.
Yes, that's right. You toured Europe for quite a while.
Yeah, from 2007 till 2013. That's quite
nice.
We did another, and then we started working with some European musicians over there and did an album with them. And then the kind of research project started towards my PhD. So And that changed everything again.
Let's talk about that. And this now starts to integrate into the very convoluted, massive rabbit hole that is your gear and your instruments, shall we call it?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
You know, I was watching your show with Nathan Smith earlier today, just to get a sense of what this would be like.
Yeah.
And I was just fascinated. You know, he's talking about Clapton and how he learned the Clapton solo, and I was realizing, like, I'm definitely not an atypical guitarist, that's for sure. And I think that project maybe emerges out of that. You know, I grew up listening to orchestral music and experimental electronic music because of what my dad was into. The guitar really, truth be told, was basically because there was one in the house.
Right.
So I guess if it had been the panpipes, heaven forbid, it would have wound up being the panpipes. But so the guitar is really for me like a vehicle to explore, you know. And
it's really good for that, isn't it?
It is.
So much more than any other instrument.
I think so. It's had such a diverse history, you know. The classical guitar, obviously, from Segovia, and then from Charlie Christian, electrification changed everything. And then, once effects and progressive rock happened, then, it's just continued. But I think the guitar, for me, the PhD project is really, aside from extending the capacity of the body, which we can talk about in a minute, but it's really about painting in the same way as one would orchestrally. I think about the instrument orchestrally.
Yeah. Which is awesome because, I think a lot of guitarists are very sort of
single line
or chord or, and that's it,
Fender Strat into a Fender amp, crank up the mids,
Yeah,
which is great. It was great. I tend to like, I like the way sound moves across time, and if you were able to do that with the guitar, is what the PhD project was about. Like, how could you make a sound behave in the same way as an orchestral thing would, like a Mahler symphony or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us about what you did for your PhD.
Sure. So with the European...
Strap yourselves in, kids. This gets crazy.
No, with the European touring, in the process of touring Funk for the Shaolin Monk and the subsequent album in 2009, which was called Got Funk or Travel, innovative title, I found by 2011, doing the festivals there and stuff, I bought an M13 from you, I believe, and some other effects pedals. And I found myself wanting to be able to modify the sound while I was playing. So eventually, by the end of those tours, I was playing with my left hand only, on my knees, on a stage at a festival, twiddling a knob while I was trying to play, and getting very frustrated that I couldn't get both hands working and stuff.
Yeah.
So the PhD question was, well, to put it in blunt terms, how can I twiddle knobs without twiddling knobs? Right, so how can I keep playing with my hands and really subtly modify the sounds?
And feet are very limiting,
the feet have got one or two controllers. So that project, I looked at ribbon controllers. So we strapped ribbon controllers to the neck. At one stage, tried that. That didn't work. I tried D-beam controllers. All sorts of different ways of trying to, access control over the guitar. And then I stumbled on this thing from the 90s called a Gypsy Midi-Controller. It was released as like a MIDI dance thing. If you want to go on YouTube, you can see some really corny adverts of people in spandex dancing. It's awful. But I immediately thought, wow, okay, that would be really cool as a controlling device. And I found the factory in Birmingham, I think, and they had one unit left. It was quite rusted and stuff. So I got them to ship me the frame. And then I worked with a software engineer at Blipz who put an Arduino. I don't know if you know
Israel, what was his name? What's his?
Anton. No, you won't know him.
No, okay.
But he's an Arduino engineer. I don't know if you know those Raspberry Pis, these little computers.
Yeah.
So that's above my capacity. He wrote the code for that thing, and that maps out the original components of the suit through software and spits out MIDI on the other side. And so this suit is just a mechanical exoskeleton you climb in and you can modify and assign it to it.
So how many parameters did you have?
So your joints are, like on your wrist, you've got 3 degrees of rotation. So you got that one, and this one, right? So there's one CC, as you know, on an Ableton push or whatever.
Yeah.
There's one CC for each of those.
Yeah.
And then there's one for your elbow, one for the rotator cuff, and one for the forearm on each.
Okay.
It's a nightmare to control it, so it took a lot of practice. And yeah, it was. I did a PhD recital, which you were at in 2014, which was good. The subsequent concerts with it were much better, obviously, as I learned the instruments.
Yeah.
But really great.
And then, so in conjunction with the suit, tell us about the instrument that you built.
Right, so the
hollow body Ibanez.
Yeah, it's gone. I hacked it to pieces again. But it was a hollow body Ibanez. I picked it up from you and took it upstairs to JD Custom and said to JD, get out the Dremel blade, and we chopped the back out of it. We actually took it out the carbon and unwrapped it.
You cut a big hole in the back,
yeah. And so the plan with that, because it was a budget Ibanez, it wasn't the plan was to...
It was a cheap George Benson or something,
I think it was an Artcore. But the plan was to just mount some analog effects in there, because also the way analog effects were responding at that time, I think this was before the helixes, and it wasn't
it was quite primitive still back then, wasn't it?
Yeah. And Ableton, etc. were still...
Also infancy stages.
Not where they are now.
Yeah.
And so the idea was to put like hardware in the guitar, and then we could, have a tactile kind of... So the guitar became tactile, the front surface covered in knobs. And then the suit was able to control other external parameters.
So just going into more detail, you actually you took apart guitar pedals out of their metal boxes and stuck them inside the guitar.
Yeah, took
with
them
the knobs sticking out the front, so you could.
Yeah, and then hand soldered them. So back to the fact that it was an Artcore, right?
Yeah.
The idea was that I'd test it out on this guitar, and then move it to something nicer, But by the time I'd spent 6 months soldering all these tiny cables, I thought, no, I'm just leaving it in there. That was that. It was like, it worked, and that was good. Yeah.
Okay, so now you said you got rid of the Ibanez, and what did it evolve to?
So I had this idea.
And then next question, what type of crazy music did you play on it?
Right, that's two questions. So I had this idea during that thing that I wanted the thing to be hardware based, because at that time, Imogen Heap was just starting with the My Mute Glove stuff and seeing to wrists, and that was all software based.
Okay.
And I wanted, for some reason, part of my PhD idea was to make it very tactile and hardware-y, because there's something about the hardware gauge that appealed to me.
Yeah.
So now I've moved away from that, because that was successful, and also Ableton has evolved a bit. The music that suited that on that particular day was something just that was what's called graphic notation. So it's like pictures that are suggestive of sound, and you can look it up on Google. It's a very, very cool way to improvise and play. So the thing has shape.
Is it on YouTube? That
that thing is on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll put the link up for people to go check it out.
But graphic notation is very, very useful. There was a very, very famous set of scores written in the 60s called treatises by Cornelius Cardew. And they're like, I think it's 90 pages or so of these graphic notation things. And lots of people have played them. In fact, one of my favorite versions of it is by Sonic Youth, Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth. They do a great version of one of the songs. So orchestras have done classical ensembles. We did something, borrowed some of the ideas from that. Sonic Youth have done them. So that's the music for that. Since then, it's become more complicated. It's all moved across to software now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
On a little side note, let's just talk a little bit about improvisation.
Right.
What are you thinking about when you are improvising? Do you try and obviously you have to learn a lot of the theory and practice improvising as well, and have the knowledge and all that. But what are you thinking about when you improvise? Do you try and forget, because you know all the rules? Right. Do you try and forget them, and do you just try to go in the moment and just take risks? Well, what's your process when you? Let's say you're performing in front of 1,000 people and you're to improvise. What's going through your mind?
So, sure. Give me 2 minutes here to unpack improvisation first. That's very important, because there's 3 different schools of improvisation. There's a classical music thing called aleatoricism, which is not applicable here.
Mm.
And then there's jazz. Jazz is, put into a phrase, I think, is horizontal superimpositions over vertical harmonic structures, right? So chords, lines on top that work with the chords.
Yeah.
So as a jazz musician, like someone like monster guitarist, Uma Levine, right? You can hear all the harmonic, superimpositions and plays lines that work with those harmonies.
Yeah.
The third improvisation is called free improvisation, which is graphic notations related to that, where the improvisation is about dialogue.
Mm.
So we've been improvising now for 20 minutes or so far. I say something, you're acknowledging, responding, blah, blah, blah. So it's a dialogue, continual dialogue. And what's exciting about this dialogue is that we had no idea of the plan, the outcomes. So it's intriguing for people to watch. It's intriguing for us to engage with. And I'm interested in that.
Mm.
So if there's 1,000 people there, you can feel the response of an audience. Like they send stuff your way.
Yeah.
We all know this.
Yeah.
Not just throwing beer bottles or something. I don't like it.
That's what I get
But you can, even a quiet concert hall, you can sense something. If I'm doing a classical recital with James Grace, you can feel them. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And so
they go super quiet and
there's something in the energy. It's wonderful. Yeah. So as a free improviser, I'm looking to exchange not just harmonic or rhythmic material with you. I'm looking about the exchange of energy, or looking for the exchange of energy, and I'm also sensing what's going on out there.
Yeah.
So there can be this free flow of information. That for me is improv.
And I suppose it makes you a better muser, because it's the form of music, I suppose, where you listening to your fellow musicians the most, and not just rocking out in your own little world.
It has its economic downfalls, because going back to Nathan, I'm like admiring him learning an Eric Clapton solo note for note. Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And you got to see. I went to see the Led Zeppelin one that was at the Barnyard with
Sito.
That was so great, so wonderful, and there's something beautiful about seeing that performance replicated, all the tones, the color of it. It's really, really gorgeous. The problem with this stuff is nothing's ever the same. It's wonderful in the moment, and then somebody will recommend, say, well, you should go see these guys. They sound like X, and you go to the concert and it's like, that sounds nothing like that. So it's not a very good economic model in that sense, but it is very interesting.
And most of your sort of free improvisation sessions, are you generally happy with them? I mean, how often is it like you walk off stage going, yes?
No, most of the time these days.
Okay, that's good.
No, most of the time I'm very happy. It only ever goes wrong when one person shuts down a dialogue, and not intentionally. Maybe something's happened or something's bugging them, and you can't get through. So that's when it gets a bit weird.
Yeah.
But there's ways of setting up. What's the word? I think it's a bad word, but controls. There are control mechanisms you can put in place to ensure that things go in a certain communicative direction. So my most recent project, Deep Spacer, it's the whole kind of Ableton and gear ecology is set up to make sure that those conversations are facilitated. So we have a completely closed environment where everything is tempo synced between us via the one machine. The drummer has control over all the tempos, all delays, and it's Cesare Casarini on bass, so lots of wobbles.
Right, and that makes your life so much easier. More, less stuff to think about, and you can think more about.
Focus on the dialogue.
Yes.
And also that's more interesting for an audience. I mean, contemporary audience, when things just completely abstract, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
But if stuff is tempo based, most people can enjoy it. They're like, and the tempo changes and stuff. But at least the tempo is synchronized. So,
Okay, that's really cool. So it's you and Cesare and who?
Etienne Oosthuizen.
Yes, I know
drummer.
Etienne. Yes, wonderful drummer. He was overseas for a while doing shows and
he did a lot of theatre. He did a lot of theatre work. So quite a diverse bunch of guys.
And Cesare's amazing.
Working musician.
Yeah.
In the scene, me on the academic side, and then Etienne from the theatre side. Yeah.
It's cool having, talking about Cesare, he's one of the few bass players who's seriously into gear, which is cool, you know.
Scarily into gear, yes.
Because most bass players are like, give me a P bass and a amp. And that's it.
No,
which I like, but no, he's a nutter. It's great.
He's got this Boss SY300, a synth pedal.
Oh yeah, it's brand new.
Yeah, and he has been hassling me to get this thing MIDI synced, and he came to my house on Friday and wouldn't leave until it was done. So yeah, he's into his gear.
Oh, he's great. Good laugh. Yeah. Let's talk about your the education side of things. How's Wits doing? How's the state of the of music education? I mean, is there anything, you know? What's the vibe out there in terms of education, you know, the broader education spectrum?
Sure, I think, I mean, it's a difficult time for education worldwide. I mean, let's just shift the focus, not to avoid the question at all, but just to shift the focus of music for a moment. I mean, my nephew, he's in Nottingham. He's just graduated from his A-levels, and he did applied maths. He's like quite a boffin. Yeah. And we were chatting on the phone. He's like, I'm not going to university. He says, why would I want to go to university? I said, I'm saddled myself with a massive student loan. So and he's gone to not Ernst & Young, one of the other big PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yeah. They have internships now where they put you through the equivalency of a degree program whilst you intern. And his salary is bigger than mine
sense.
After all these years, straight away. Yeah. So worldwide there is a shift. I think it's got to do with the fourth industrial revolution, etc. But the other aspect that's interesting is that I think that music is deeply challenged, and that's because the quality of education worldwide is extremely good, right? Which might seem, a counterproductive statement, but it really is. Like in Melbourne, I was there about a year and a bit ago. Like there's just musicians on every corner, and no one's got work. Nashville's got the same issue. Yeah. Everyone's really, really, really good. So the quality of music education worldwide, I think, is good. Yes. There may be too many musicians in the economic model of too high a standard to make it a viable career option. Sure. So that's challenging as an educator. Like, what are we doing? What are we setting people up for? So Wits has had some innovative approaches to that across the years. Is our degree is multifaceted. We don't stream you. So if you went to the UK, you get streamed very early. You either do recording technology or jazz or classical or whatever. Okay. So we kind of keep all of those on the boiler at the same time. Right. Okay. And you decide later. Okay. And that seems to have been effective for a lot of guys. As many as do the work, obviously, but a lot of guys have done well out of that. Okay. And yeah, like you said, it's good to hear that. We just need more. Just need more venues in this country and more support from the government. More, it's sad to hear that education is great. The kids are coming through, but then they're not getting work. We need to fix that. Yeah. I mean, like so the UK. In the UK, the club scene is supported by the government. They provide the funding to pay the all over Europe fees. Yeah. And the government will supply the warehouses. And Australia, same as in Australia. Yeah, that's the one aspect. Yeah. I do think that there's another aspect that nobody likes talking about, and so I'll talk about it. And please that's that we tend to be backward looking in South Africa still. So, if you want to know what's going to be cutting edge in 5 to 10 years, you go buy the magazine called The Wire. Okay, it's a British magazine. It's all the edgiest stuff in the UK. That gives you a kind of marker for what's going to land in the mainstream arena in 5 to 10 years, right? Yeah. Problem with us is we're looking at the mainstream arena from 2 years ago and trying to replicate that. Yeah. So we're always on the back of the curve, okay? So we're not kind of getting any kind of traction on our newer stuff. So I've heard that often. Gorma's genre is great. It was great. Early Kwaito was completely amazing. So we've had some kind of things that have taken off, but we haven't sustained that. Yeah. So I think, yes, there are no venues, but we also need to find and shape our own identity first. I've heard that often. Take more risks. Big time. Yeah, no, that's good. Advice for youngsters, young musicians trying to crack it. What are your thoughts on
words of advice to help them along?
I had a third year student ask me this question this week. He said he wants to be a game composer, but the only request for work that he's getting are for these kids' albums. He says, how do I get more game album stuff? So I wrote back to him, I said, don't be arrogant, take the kids' albums work, do it well. If that means farming it out to a colleague and not making any money, you need your name associated with work of a high quality. So my advice to young people is take anything you can and do it exceptionally well.
Okay.
Practice till your fingers bleed, bandage yourself up, and carry on. Right? That's it.
Yeah.
The idea of practice is not very popular anymore.
People want shortcuts. Yeah.
They do. I mean, Carlo Mombelli, who teaches at Blipz with me, he's famous for practicing 14 hours a day and then stuffing up his hand.
Yeah.
When I was doing my masters, I was not doing as much as 14. I was doing 8. You need to put in that mastery hours.
Yeah.
And take any work. Don't be snobbish.
Yeah.
There's a lot of snobbishness.
Yeah.
That must go.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. Good advice. We're out of time.
Thank you, Stu.
Thank you for giving up your valuable time to be with us.
Thank you so much.
And yeah, thank you so much. Cool, guys. That's all for now. All the links for Jonathan Crossley's work and social media addresses and all that will be in the links in the description below. That's all we have time for. See you next week. Cheers.